and we'll be doing, formal welcomes, etc. in a few moments. We're due to start in about 5 minutes, but I do see that some folks were wondering why they couldn't hear anything, and it's because our faithful host I'll say Christine Feeney, is in control of that for us, and has muted folks. So if you find yourself that you had unmuted and then you find yourself muted, it's because she's controlling that. We're trying to ensure with an expected 60 plus people listening in that we do as much to control unexpected background noises. Not to say that I don't love a cutie or a laugh or a kitten or a bark in the background, but you could imagine with that possibly happening with 60 plus people. So don't be surprised if you can't hear anything, and just sort of take these last few moments to get your coffee, your water, or whatever, and then we'll formally kick this off. Thanks. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to wave my hand so you have a sense where the voice is coming from. I am Monica Brown. I am one of the senior program officers here at the Greater Rochester Health Foundation, and I primarily work in our responsive grants portfolio. And it's 11 o'clock. And so I am going to just begin with our welcome and continue to give folks time to sign on. As I shared a few moments ago, we're expecting, potentially upwards of 60 people on the call. And so I'm sure we'll just continually have people checking in and checking out. If you notice that you are put on mute and you did not do that yourself, our hostess, Christine Feeney, who actually, supports much of the programmatic work that takes place here at the Health Foundation, is going to be controlling that for us to help ensure that we don't have any accidental noise. I will share, as I stated a few minutes ago, not that I don't love a cutie in the background, or, the purr of a kitten, or, a little bark of a puppy, but we know with 60 plus people on the phone that can be a little bit of a challenge. So we are going to control that. And then when we move into the open part of the session, we will ask folks and we'll provide you the ability to unmute yourself accordingly. So before we sort of move into this formally, as I shared who I am, I also want to give the opportunity for my colleague, Hannah Stark, who I'll have wave, so you'll see where she's placed on the screen, just sort of introduce herself so you get a chance to meet us at least virtually.
Thank you, Monica. So as Monica said, I'm Hannah Stark. I am one of the Associate Program Officers at the Health Foundation. I also primarily work in the responsive grants team and portfolio. I help oversee the community health grants, which is our smaller grant program, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, but also dabble in a couple of things at the foundation. So happy to be here. If there's any questions, I'm excited to hear how it goes. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Hannah. So I am happy to formally kick off the first open Q&A session that we're having for the call for ideas proposals 2020 out of the responsive grants portfolio. And just a few technical pieces. One, we are recording this and we will be posting it. So if you have a colleague that maybe didn't get a chance to listen to this, you'll be able to go online and listen to it. Or if you want to reflect back on a question, we will also be pulling out the individual questions and posting the questions and answers on the website as well. And as we've been sharing in our communications thus far, you will also be able to continually ask us questions via the email address. So I would say don't hesitate or feel like if you don't get to a question or don't hear something in this space today, that you don't have any other opportunity to follow up and get your questions answered, because that's really important to us. So the other technical pieces of this that we want to make sure that folks are familiar with is, because technically this isn't a webinar, this is a Zoom meeting that we are using as a format. What I'm going to do is first begin by answering some of the questions that came in prior to the call, which I appreciate. We got a lot of great questions that way, and I think a lot of those questions would probably cover with what a lot of folks are thinking on their mind that they want to know. But we also are encouraging folks to, in your chat function, to type in your questions there as well. And Hannah's going to help facilitate, that I'm able to answer questions and keep track of what's going on in the chat box. And you will also, when we then open it up, be able to use the raise hand function, raise your hand. Hannah will then request that you then unmute yourself, and then you would be also able to ask your question, to the entire group, and I can answer it that way. We are asking because, of course, there's sometimes a difference between who registers and who might actually be on the call, that in the chat box you put your name, organization, and your email address, because that's going to be another way that we will have a good understanding as to who was on the call. Not because we're trying to track you, but because one of the things we want to do is push direct communication to folks that joined us today, and that will give us a way to sort of have a very specific listserv to go from that's accurate. So I want to make sure that I'm not forgetting any important procedural things. Hannah, is there anything else that I should be sharing that I've left off before I sort of go into my spiel and answering some of the questions?
No, the only ask I would have is be patient with me as I figure out who's raising and who's asking questions. So yeah, but you got it all.
Yeah, I would say be patient with us from that perspective. And also from a sort of safety perspective, one of the things that we know that in this new world of Zoom, folks have experienced some unwanted visitors at times. So if in the unlikely event that happens with us, Christine is going to immediately disconnect the call. And if that were to happen, just know that we will follow up with everyone and still get questions answered. We don't think that would happen, but if it did, don't be surprised if you get disconnected, because we would want to make sure that, you know, we don't sort of get any, you know, unwanted visitors. So that is something that we are looking to do. So, with that said, you know, I know we have a short period of time here today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over the information that is in the Call for Ideas document itself. I'd rather spend time, you know, sort of answering and taking a look at some of the more subtle aspects that I know people want to know. And I know for the most part, some of this is going to seem repetitive. One of the things we know is that some of you on the phone have partnered with us in responsive grants under our community health grants, maybe our opportunity grants. And so may think about our work from that perspective. And one of the things that we want to make sure people know is that this Call for Ideas, although not a total, you know, diverging from that, this is a new way that we're looking to approach our responsive work. So I would say, you know, don't necessarily think about what you've heard or what you know, and more so let the information that's in this new proposal shape the way you think about what we're looking to do, right? So let me just start there for setting that foundation a little bit. And sometimes I will guide you and specifically refer you back to where this information is in the document. And so really, when you talk about our goal with this work, it really is as simple as it is sort of noted on page 1 of the Call for Ideas when we're under what we're looking to do. And everybody here knows that we're in an unprecedented time globally, right? And then locally as well. And so whereas we always have looked in responsive grants to be the leg of investment from the foundation that is just that responsive, wants to listen and partner with our community and community organizations to sort of see and understand what the greatest and most pressing needs are. With this, we are also wanting to do so probably in the most broad ways that we ever have before. So you'll notice that we haven't specifically targeted any areas of service. We're open to programs, services, advocacy, any number of needs or issues. But what we are drilling down on are issues around inequities, right? And wanting to make sure that especially during this time that we are prioritizing the most pressing needs and that we are supporting the folks that have been unduly marginalized and kept from obtaining the kinds of services and supports that could help promote health, and healthy environments, right? And so that's our focus. So we purposely have kept it broad because we can't tell you what those things are. We have ideas, of course, because we too are following, research and taking a look at what data is sharing with us, and we're having great conversations with you on the ground. But we want to hear from you and thus the community what's coming forth, right? So we're purposely not being prescriptive. And so I know that might seem surprising, but that's really why there are no specific parameters. We've even been asked, like, oh, do you want service oriented work, or do you want clinical oriented work? And we actually would say we want work that is needed based on community feedback and collaboration, right? And so you're telling us what the need is, and then we're listening and seeing where and how our value and investment focus lines up. So from there, what I'm going to do is start with, like I said, some of the initial questions that came in. So sorry if you see my head turning. I have a dual screen, and I have those questions right here in front of me. And we'll start with the first one. I've sort of put them in 4 categories. General questions that sort of ask about the type of things we're looking for, some questions regarding demographics, and then questions that more so speak to funding parameters. So the first question I sort of started already digging in, and that is what types of programs will be accepted. And I sort of went into that. I spoke to what you could see on page 1 under our focus. I would say the thing I can say type of project is TBD based on need, but we will be looking for not just innovation for innovation's sake, because I know during a time of great stress and strain, it's really sort of hard to sort of think innovatively necessarily. But what we mean by that is that we are still, even during this time, wanting folks to think outside of the normal parameters, or not just falling into doing things the way we always have done them, right? But that we are still taking a beat and taking a breath and thinking about how we could approach things differently given the current set of circumstances, given the needs, given our collaboration and co-design that we would be doing with community voice in mind. So that's an important piece. Of course, as always, we're looking for partnerships that are productive and truly, have synergy, and folks are working together in a truly collaborative way, and that folks are looking to take what they learn and know and share it with us and one another. So that all is expressed on pages 1 and 2 of the call for ideas under our focus and what we will fund. The next question we have is, can an organization submit more than one idea? And whereas we have not explicitly said you cannot, I would say this. Of course, there's more than one need, and so that's not surprising that an organization may have more than one area that they want to send in an idea around. But we say this: you should be thinking about what is the most pressing need that needs to be moved forward. And so I would challenge and say, although you may have several, you should be thinking about the need that is most pressing, that you are most poised to be able to address, and where you have the most sort of energy and ability to affect change. One of the most important questions, what do we mean by client feedback? So we're not even just talking about client feedback, because most of us here are very accustomed to and probably have always for a long time now integrated some sort of client feedback through advisory committees, etc. Some of you may even be participating with the United Ways systems integration work and familiar with the human-centered design work that is being moved forward. What we mean by client feedback is, yes, integration of client voice, but beyond client voice is integration of client understanding and desires, even in the identification of a solution, right? Like your approach, how did you come about this? And were community members, your intended audience, included in that design or that thought or idea? As importantly, will they be continued to be a part of the delivery of that? And will you continue to use that feedback to make edits and changes? Because we know the most powerful approach is when you combine what research tells us, what the data tells us, with what you as folks that have been doing this work in the community know, with then the lived experience, the knowledge and desires of the intended communities and folks that we're looking to serve. And when you bring those three pieces of information together, you are then positioned to most likely affect the kind of change, make the kind of improvements that we're all looking and hoping to see. And so the way that looks can be varied, but the purpose of it is to have those three things functioning continually in the project. As you will see, purposely with this particular offering, we are not asking for a deep level of detail in this first phase, which is just the call for the initial idea. So we don't expect for necessarily every detail to be fleshed out, but for you to have a pretty firm foundation and understanding of what you're looking to do and why and how. And we're asking for you to capture that in a 4-page double-spaced document or 2-page single-spaced. So the idea is then that we are making it easy and more accessible to a broader range of community partners to be able to share your thoughts and ideas. We know this is a busy time, and to ask everybody to put in 50 plus hours as you typically have to with a more traditional grant proposal, isn't a good use of anybody's time right now. And so that's another reason why we're just asking for the shorter ideas, and then we can take a look, have conversations, and then where appropriate, ask folks to provide us with additional details. So I don't want you to sort of feel stressed by, oh, wow, did I, put in a competitive call for ideas, right? We're really trying to make this not transactional, but to how do we sort of get a sense and start forming a relationship so we have a better sense of what the need is beyond even just what's on paper. And that's one of the ways that we're hoping that we can then connect better across size of organizations, types of organizations, and across our geography. So moving on a little bit to the type, going back to the types of work that we're looking to have come through. One person asked, are we more interested in one project over the other? I sort of shared, we're interested in knowing what the most pressing need is and why that now. Knowing that we're going to have competing priorities, not to sound cliche, but it's going to be true. We're going to have more need than we will be able to support. Keeping in mind that our focus is on addressing inequities, and that we are focused and are a health foundation. So we're taking a look at inequities as it pertains to health. And so because we ascribe to the World Health Organization, definition of health, which then is all encompassing of the social determinants of health. Recognizing that health is about what's happening physically, emotionally, and socially. We know then, that means lots of things are included under that umbrella, but it'll be important for you to make that thread and that connection between how that work specifically is fueling, improving health and addressing the inequity that has been the cause of the health issue. That will be very important because we know that when you do work with that in mind, the impact, the health-related impact is more direct than if you were not thinking about those two things in relationship. The next question is about can the grant be used to extend a current successful program? Once again, we're purposely not trying to set parameters in terms of like, we're going to fund these kinds of things and not something. If you have a successful program, we know that funding right now is uncertain. And so it's not going to be surprising for folks to have successful programs that right now are at risk. I would just say the same thing applies. You would want to be able to sort of speak to those same areas of necessity and those connections around community voice and input. So yes, the short answer, but you would still be needing to make those important connections. Next question, can you address two intersecting issues such as food insecurity and housing? And yes, please, right? Because we know these things don't take place in isolation, that most often the issues that are creating the inequity are interconnected and sometimes in ways that you can't pull them apart. So whether you're doing that in your organization solo because you take a look at both of those issues collaboratively, or you are going to then work in concert with another organization. We love to see that kind of synergy working together. Another question, what type of services can be funded for rural residents? And I would say, the kinds of services that are needed. We recognize that in our investment geography, the 9 counties, we have urban, rural, suburban geographies, all of which have different needs as a result. And so there's no difference in terms of the kinds of services we would potentially support. It's just that the type may look different. We are as focused in our rural communities around issues of inequity as we would be in our urban or suburban communities. And in fact, one of the things that we will also be taking a look at is how, to the best of our abilities, can we sort of, with the amount of funds that we will be releasing, have representation across all of those geographies and environments. I think I sort of already answered this one, but is this an opportunity open to neighborhood organizations, smaller organizations? And the answer to that is yes, but you have to be a 401c3 or you're partnering with a 401c3, right? A nonprofit. So, Hannah, did I see your hand go up? Oh, I said a 401c3, didn't I? 501c3, thank you. 501c3, right? Sorry about that. A nonprofit. So that is the important piece, right? So, like I said, we're hoping to be able to, be across various types of organizations, because we know in our communities that our grassroots organizations, our clinical services, and our larger health and human service entities all are working together to provide the kind of supports that folks are needing. One, to address some of the unexpected needs that are still with us as a result of our current pandemic, and all the other services and needs that were there prior to us dealing with this pandemic. The next set of questions has to do with some demographics. Folks wanting to know, one, is it okay to estimate the number of like the demo of the populations that you serve. That's one of the questions that we do ask for you to answer in those 2 pages single spaced or 4 pages double spaced. And absolutely, because we know that for reasons of privacy or etc., that folks don't necessarily know that, or maybe have not been capturing that. So absolutely, it would be okay to make estimates around like the number of folks that, you know, maybe are of representation of different populations that have been traditionally marginalized and systematically discriminated against. So that's the short answer to that question. And of course, then we would be wanting to work with and encourage, like, what are the ways that we can more specifically get that identifying information, not as a way to like segment out or label, but to have a better sense of where we are hitting the mark in being able to reach out to folks, or maybe where we need to make more of an effort. In terms of the larger data and demographics of having an understanding of, like, you know, what are the number of folks impacted by poverty, or, you know, how many young folks in an area are dealing with issues of intellectual or developmental disabilities, or how many indigenous folks are there. You know, one would want to have a sense of what the universe of is and what the need is, and how many folks, because ideally, if you're matching who you are as an organization with the needs of those populations, you do have some data understanding. But of course, it doesn't mean that you have all the answers. So, you know, in terms of the simple answer of how much data you need to have, it would be enough to be proposing a way to support, address, solve the issue at hand, right? And so there's no concrete definite to that, but you know, there is a, you know, you can't say you're looking to address an issue that pertains to an inequity and you don't have any sense of what's going on with that population, or where that population is within the geography you're looking to work within. Funding parameters. Can funding support capital line items, for example, renovation and or construction? So if you were looking at the call for ideas, you would see on, it's the 3rd page of the call for ideas, what we will fund. And you'll see that what we will fund is pretty broad. It goes back to what we were saying about not wanting to be prescriptive. And wanting to be able to say, you know, you tell us what needs to be funded to help stabilize and or build up and address the issues that need to be addressed for our most vulnerable and marginalized within our communities. But I would say that, you know, literally, whether it be physical manifestation of a building or a program or project, the if we build it, they will come is not the perspective we're looking to come from. So whether you're asking us for support that are general operating supports, or you're asking specifically for a programmatic or service support, advocacy support, etc., you should be able to firmly make the connection as to why that thing, issue, need brings us to our first and most important goal, which is around looking to address and support the needs of our most vulnerable, marginalized folks within the 9-county region. It's all about that connect. And why this now, right? Knowing that, you know, there are a whole host of things that are really pressing and in need to support the communities we care about. Can you have two, oh, I'm sorry, I moved on to, oh no, those are only 2, like, sort of demographics. I didn't say this, but I had moved on to funding parameters. The next funding parameter question I have is, can we have 2 leads on a project? As I shared before, we definitely want to encourage true coordination and collaboration between organizations, but you can only have one entity that actually is where, the money, the funding is directed through and to, right? And so it would be important to sort of determine who is the best, um, entity given the project design to be that, right? Whether it's because you have the back office mechanisms and such to administer, or you are set up in such a way that you have some of the most flexible, easy systems in place as an organization to be able to like facilitate and move through those kinds of pieces in a collaboration, etc. I'm sure it's not a surprise to anybody here on the call with us today that collaboration takes relationship and trust, and making those decisions around who's going to take the financial lead is one of the ways in which that is established and shown. Going back to what I had mentioned before, we're looking for this to be relational and not transactional. And so as we move from phase 1, which is the initial sharing of the idea, those who are then moved forward to be asked for full proposals, and then those organizations that are going to be able to receive funding, we will be looking to work still even in partnership with you and or the other collaborators on the project. So we're hoping that that design also puts us in a position where we can support the development and the continued success of any collaborations that have been set forth. And whatever we can do to help enrich, that we will do. One other really important question, and it's the last formal one that I got a chance to see. There may have been 1 or 2 others that have come in under the chat, and I will ask Hannah to help me with that because I don't necessarily see any, but I know we've been asking folks to put their name, organizations, and addresses into the chat box, so I may be missing the questions, if any, that are in there. The last one is probably one of the most practical, and it has to do what is the range of funding and the timeline, right? Always the brass tacks, like, what are we really talking about here? So the theme you've been hearing me repeat has to do with, flexibility and, responsiveness. And so the simple answer is the time period we are estimating is anywhere from 1 year up to 5 years, right? And the amount that we are expecting that we might see as a request is anywhere from 25,000 to 500,000, maybe like over that 5-year period. And so when folks have said to me, well, how much, I have to come back with, because we're asking for you to tell us what the need is, you should be telling us how much it would take to make this truly happen. Now, how much of that we would be able to fund or support, that is what we can come back and share with you. But what we're looking for is what's the truth and what the need is, and what's the truth and what are the resources that it'll take to support that. So that's what we are asking. But we did provide some sort of idea of what we were thinking might come in, or where we are, because we still know as a funder that we have our history of where we have been in our grant making in general. Like, are we a foundation that gives out, $5,000 typically for every grant, or are we a foundation that gives out, $2 million for every grant? So we do know that giving a sense of that is important. The other piece that I'm going to address before we open up for any additional questions or hand raising or taking a look at what may be in the chat box is the other important piece that we tried hard to communicate in a way that made sense, but know that, you know, getting a chance to hear me talk about it could add additional clarification. And that has to do with the portion on page 4 of the document that talks about important dates and activities. If you had a chance to review the document, you will see that we, in an effort to make it open and accessible, as I've stated a couple of times, we're doing it in 2 phases, making the first way in which we connect just the 2 to single space, 4-page double space document, answering the 6 questions that are there, not even saying you have to answer them in order, but we just want to make sure that within those pages you answer and address all of those points of information. And we're also keeping the call open and rolling, right? Which is what we're looking to do because we know that the timing of things, one of the ways that we can meet the current needs is not by just having hard defined deadlines. With that truth, the other piece is that from an internal perspective, we do have important decision points because then we take the information you share with us, we then participate on a review panel, make some initial determinations, would be following up for more details if needed, and then putting information together that we then bring forward to our board to get final approval for awards. So because of that, there are some decision points, even though we will be accepting those call for ideas ongoing. So the first decision point that has a date attached to it would be, we have the times in which we speak to our board and come together 2 times in the next, would that be 6 months or so? Yeah, 6 months is in October 2020 and January 2021. So if you're looking to definitely have your call for ideas in and in time to definitely allow for us to be able to review it and give it consideration to be asked for a full proposal, we would need to see that, you know, document by Friday, September 4th, because that would give us enough time to review and then if needed, get additional information from you and still be able to do what we need to be able to do to then make a determination and bring it in front of our board. However, of course, we're still going to be taking that information after September 4th, and we will continue to take those call for ideas. That's just the date that we can say definitely if you give us to us by this time, we would at least be able to fully take it into consideration. If something comes in after the 4th and we're still able to process it for consideration in October, we absolutely will do that. The next piece is then, if you're then looking for consideration for January 2021, we would need to see those call for idea proposals by Friday, October 30th, because that will then give us enough time to do the follow-up needed to be ready for the board meeting. And we were trying to also be conscious of not falling into what for some folks are a busy holiday season that often happens towards the end of the year, right? Whether it's a holiday season for some or just sort of end of the year, you know, close out things that can make things busy. So we will also be staying in constant communication because during this time more than ever, we want to be responsive and not prescriptive. So as we continue to have conversations, here at the foundation about the ways in which we can be listening to what you're telling us and then making adjustments to what we're doing accordingly, we will be announcing like, oh, we've added some more decision points, or, we got in 2,000 call for ideas. And so give us a few more moments because we want to be able to reach out and connect with everyone, but it's going to take a little bit more time than we anticipated, right? So know that this is going to be iterative, and that we too are piloting a different way of approach and interaction, and we'll need a little bit of grace and space, as a colleague of mine likes to say, and I've adopted that saying for myself, as we all sort of move through this process during this unprecedented time. So in a few moments, I'm gonna stop speaking and I'm gonna turn it over to Hannah to be able to ask for a raised hand to ask a question, or to let me know a question that has come in. I just want to say, we also would love your feedback on how we are doing and how we did on conveying what our new intent and approach is, and what are the additional areas that we can continue to add or change that just furthers our goal around, developing, a relationship with and an understanding of, these kinds of interactions with our partners, sharing with us the needs and ideas, and us being able to share back with you, where we're able to invest, or maybe not, but what does that mean? And less of this idea that it's, we put out a call, you answer, we say yes or no, and then we don't sort of have any kind of interaction until the next time we put out a call, or you don't have a full understanding of maybe why that wasn't a fit that we were able to respond to. And so that's what we're also moving towards. And most importantly, the understanding that as a foundation, that we have taken a firm stand in recognizing that one of, or the largest driver of issues of public health concern has to do with racism and other inequities that have, systematically and structurally for decades, centuries, impacted the health of our marginalized communities, people of color, African American folks, Black and brown folks, Indigenous folks, people who deal with physical, intellectual, or developmental disabilities, LGBTQ folks, etc. And goodness knows we are never going to put down exhaustive lists, but we want to make sure you understand that that's a commitment of ours, is to figure out how do we provide those supports and right those wrongs so that we can remove the barriers and the structures that have prevented folks from enjoying the kind of health and, rights to sort of live with liberty and happiness like everyone. So sorry, I got on my soapbox there for a second. Sorry about that. And I'm going to pass it over to Hannah to instruct me to answer another question if there's one.
Yeah, so before I get to the questions, I just wanted to reiterate what Monica was saying around the feedback, that this is very much a pilot concept, a pilot approach. And as much as we are asking you to have co-design with your communities that you're intending to serve, we're hoping the same from you. That the email that we have for the ideas at the grhf.org, please use that for any feedback, any insight that we are open and wanting to hear, as well as, like Monica said, this is an ongoing, we are planning to change this as much as feedback as we get, and really just making this approach as community as possible. There was also one, so I have two questions. One of them was around the 501c3, and it actually kind of correlated to one of the questions about how can smaller nonprofit organizations, or even just smaller, groups, take advantage of this opportunity. And I think that one of the things that I just wanted to make sure that we pointed out was that if someone is in need of a fiduciary, to be able to apply for this, that is something that, you know, one, if you do, please contact us, because we can always partner you with someone who may be in line with what you're doing. But also, if you have a fiduciary in mind, that is a way to be able to apply if you don't have your 501c3 status, as well as, you know, it also includes government entities, you know, faith-based organizations. So it's really just the nonprofit status. But Monica, we did receive a question of, if you received the Call for Ideas grant, so if you were to receive these dollars, does that eliminate you from receiving other grant dollars from the Health Foundation?
That's a good question. I should have anticipated that as being one of the ones we addressed. And along the lines of us trying to remove as many of the, you know, caveats or restrictions is no, right? Like, that's the reason why we didn't say if you're a current grantee or if you just received funding from us, fill in the date that you are not eligible to apply. Everyone who meets the 501c3 and the geography requirement is eligible to apply. And we have not set up any other guidelines around, you know, subsequent funding, etc. So no, you are, you know, this would not preclude you from submitting for any future opportunity.
I will say that is the only question that I see in the chat box that was sent. But if, you know, we open this, recognizing we only have, you know, a little under 15 minutes, we open this to anyone if there's any other questions or clarifying needs with anything that Monica or I said. Please feel free to either raise your hand, unmute, and ask away, or use the chat function.
While we're waiting for that, I'll try to, you know, say a few words of things that we are looking to emphasize, or more information or a background on what we are trying to do. And I think I'm going to spend that time just for a few moments. And if I'm talking, Hannah just waves, so then I know I should stop talking to, oh, see, I won't even start. Good.
And they're actually the similar questions around, can you just talk a little bit about the dollar amounts that have been allotted to this initiative? Yeah, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I shared that there is, you know, what we were estimating in terms of project timelines that, you know, of course, anywhere from a year to upwards of 5 years. That timeline was really based on feedback that we've received and information that we've come to learn, that we know that for some projects, you know, a year is not enough, 3 years isn't enough. And so, you know, often folks are like, you know, 5 years, sometimes it's even just to the point where now you can prove your proof of concept, which then may then open you up to being able to secure some additional funding. We also know that right now is a time of, like, you know, we're responding and we are, as best as we can, taking a look at what we think the needs will be in the future, knowing that we sometimes often never know what things are going to look like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line, but especially so now, given this unprecedented time around a pandemic, as well as other sort of political and such changes that also will influence where we go and what kind of funding for services for the folks that we look to support, what that might look like on a governmental level, whether it be on a national or local, state level. So
sorry, I just have another question after you're done.
Yeah. So, you know, 12 months to, you know, a year, knowing, once again, we're still asking for you to tell us what's needed, right? Those are parameters. We estimated that, folks are going to be asking for anywhere from 25,000 up to 500,000. We gave that amount because we purposely lowered it to 25,000 because we're not trying to have you ask for more than you need. We also know that with some of our smaller organizations who may not have as much experience with administering grants, large amounts of money may be more than like your system or you're even looking to manage. And so we wanted there to be, a range that made there was a comfort and it made sense for those newer relationships, but also to the larger end of the spectrum, because we also know that some projects and some larger organizations function on that scale. And the other part of the question is how much do you have to give out, right? That's what is being asked with that. And so the short answer to that is in 2020, we have around $900,000 to disperse. With that said, when you look at that, that's $900,000 in 2020. If every single grant came in at $100,000 over 5 years, that would be $2.7 million over 5 years, right? So how much that is due to go out this year isn't the entirety of how much this particular offering will bring to the community. But I'm also telling folks, because this isn't the first time this question has come up, to not to focus too much on the idea that we have $900,000 to give out, but to think about what is that most pressing issue that we know needs to be addressed, that you are poised to do, and why this now, and how has community been involved and will continue to be involved with the delivery of, and how is it addressing an important inequity, right? Because we have also been talking internally about how do we not only just think about who we are as a foundation and how we respond during this time based on what we know are our definite guidelines and current disbursement, but what will this call for ideas, this broad open call for ideas, inform us of that may make us need to think about things differently? It's one of the reasons why we're also not putting parameters, even though we know we may get 2 or we may get 2,000, right? But we still know even with 2,000, that's going to give us information that will force us to have to think about the level of need and what else we need to be doing as a foundation to leverage, raise awareness of, and figure out how we can even help bring in additional resources to help address these real needs that our community partners have brought forward to us.
So almost in a line with that, there was a question, so I have 2 more questions. The first question being, if we have an idea, a want or need to partner with an organization to collaborate, can the House Foundation refer organizations to each other? So if someone has an idea that they might not know what organizations are also doing something similar in that, can we help pair them?
We love to be matchmakers, right? Absolutely. One important part of the work we do, when you hear us say, and I'm sure some of you have heard us say this, like we look at, one of our roles is really obvious. People expect and know that we can provide some sort of funding resource. But as importantly are also the opportunities we have to sit at tables and make connects with folks that also bring about resources or fruitful collaborations that are beneficial. So we actually keep our eye out for that in terms of what we've heard and asking folks, have you spoken to X because they're doing a similar project? It is important whether you are formally then needing to connect because you are working on similar work or work that has good synergy, or because even if you're not going to work together formally, you still need to be aware of what's happening so you, when appropriate, can be making conscious, building blocks. Yes, we will make those referrals, but we would never force folks to work together.
Thank you. So one question we got is around the report structure back to the Health Foundation. And I thought maybe this would be an opportunity to talk a little bit about outcomes and benchmarks around that.
Yeah, perfect. So as you've heard me say, the first step in this process is submitting the 2-page single space, 4-page double space call for ideas in which you've covered those 6 areas of information. So if we can see, which pieces then, rise to the top in terms of not just need, because we know that there's going to be more justifiable, reasonable need than we can manage, but then who we would then ask for additional information for or from, and then take from there to determine who we will be able to award. We are looking to, in all aspects of this, to take away as much of the encumbering, the challenging, the stuff that keeps you bogged down in our process or the process versus doing the work and the supports as we can. And so in terms of reporting and benchmarking, what we will be looking to do is ask for as much detail as we reasonably need for the full proposal to move it forward, and then after determinations are made and awards are given, continue to work with you on implementation, detailed planning, and what will we be taking a look at, like benchmarking and determining success, not only from being able to know what the outputs and outcomes were, but what are we going to be looking for to help us know that we're in the right direction and we want to keep doing that, do more of that, or we're not necessarily headed where we thought we were going to head and we need to do some adaptations and corrections and move in a different direction. So we will be working with you as to determining what is the best way to indicate that, what are the best indicators of that, and not looking at evaluation or benchmarking or outcomes or outputs as this way to determine success or failure, but as indicators as we're going in the right direction or indications that we need to tweak and do some things differently. So there won't be any set standard or way in which that we're going to do that. But know that we are trying to move away from any kind of traditional set standard way and move towards what is the best way to get those things demonstrated. And that's not to say that data isn't something that we respect and know and want. Our research and evaluator, Dr. Elliott on staff would, we love him. We love what he represents and helps us to achieve as a foundation. And we know that that's important, but, that's not going to be the primary driver.
So we have 2 minutes left. There was one last question. If you could just repeat, please, the items you need to show pertaining client feedback and involvement.
Yeah, I can do that. So if you are on page, what is that? Page 4 of the call for response, that's where, the questions about how that might look. So what we've been looking for you to demonstrate and share with us, and some of this is going to be determined also by how you think about client engagement in general in your work, right? And the more you've been involved in thinking about this, the easier or broader your thoughts about the way in which you might be doing it will look. But when we say meaningful client engagement, we are actually saying we do want to see more than just we did a survey or we've asked questions. We are looking for, when we say meaningful is, yes, not that surveys aren't useful, but what are those other ways you've then included the intended community or service recipient or end user, if you want to use more, marketing jargon in the design. So, for example, if you are looking to address a particular health issue and you've identified an intervention, why was that intervention selected? Was it based on the feedback? Did you share that intervention idea back with the folks that you were planning to deliver it with? Have they contributed to how you plan on delivering that particular intervention? And do you plan on continually getting feedback from them as to if it's working for them that way? So we're really saying, we're asking for you to also put a little bit on a design hat and say, how are you incorporating the thoughts and needs and feedback of your design and delivery of your intervention service solution, and including the end user in that decision making and idea generating and delivering. And how that's going to look is going to vary. But I will say, if you haven't yet been introduced at all to human-centered design or design thinking, look up human-centered design, and that will give you some ideas of what people are talking about when they're asking for you to think about client engagement in a new, more effective, interactive, meaningful way. And we can make sure that on our website, we give you some links to some of that information. And we're also open to having one-on-one conversations about this as well. So you don't have to stab in the dark. If you go back after this and you're like, I'm still feeling a little like uncertain, reach out, give us a call. We can have some one-on-one conversation, but we'll also put some resources on the website.
And that's our time. Not too shabby. We're only a minute and a half over.
Yeah, that's great. That's on time in my book. So again, yay, I see a hand clap there. Yes, hand clap for that. Thanks, Carol. So there may be others, but I only see the first 25 people right here in front of me. Thank you all. As we've said, please keep open communication. We will be doing our best to be as responsive to your questions, to your reaching out to us, to setting up times to talk as possible. Hannah and I will be taking this on together, tag teaming, and we're looking forward to seeing what we can do with this together during a time when we know that the burden on us professionally and personally is different than we've ever seen before. So, we are as interested in where this brings us and what this means for us and the way in which we collaborate with you as we are in seeing how this translates in the way in which you collaborate and co-design and impact change within community. And we are excited about that. So again, thank you. All. Yeah, have a great rest of your day and be well and stay safe. Thank you. Bye.